Hey, what's up, what's cooking, what's going on everybody? Here's the Dimitrov-Boulay piano duo. My name is Dimitri Dimitrov.
And my name is Elvira Boulay.
And in today's video we're going to talk about...
Etudes.
And in today's video we're going to talk about etudes. Anyway, this was Elvira's idea for a topic, so she was going to tell you why we decided to talk about the subject.
So I was practicing lately. I was practicing the fantasy impromptu. For those of you who are following regularly, I did a couple of weeks ago. I'll link it up here in the description or there. And I was practicing this passage. And I realized that for me, technically, it was very easy. I didn't have to put any extra attention into it. But I also realized that it reminded me very much of a Chopin etude that I studied back in the conservatory, which was Opus 10 number 4, and it really reminded me technically of the etude. And so I realized that I was only able to play this in the fantasy impromptu easily because of this etude that I had previously studied. And I thought it would be really interesting to discuss etudes and whether or not you should be playing them.
In our experience, most of our students don't want to play etudes, and we can understand why. They don't seem to be the most fun pieces to play. They don't seem to be the most creative, even though I disagree with the creativity. I think personally that depending on which etudes you're playing, they can be really wonderful, but most of the time they don't seem to be as attractive as regular pieces. And so in our experience, most of the people avoid playing etudes. Actually, did we avoid playing
I was just thinking, when's the last time you practiced a new etude?
Yeah, personally, I never liked to play etudes, but that has nothing to do with if they're good to do or not. So we're going to get into the video right now. So what I wanted to tell you is something very simple that you've probably experienced yourself. Very often you would see people on YouTube or Instagram, wherever you're watching, you would see people who do prima vista, sight reading. There are people who would take this sight reading or a new piece, and they would conquer a difficult passage very quickly. These people who are able to do that, they've experienced a lot of different pieces and a lot of different etudes where different patterns occur. And so they recognize patterns quickly, because whatever patterns you have in different etudes, very often you would have them in regular pieces as well, like just Elvira mentioned in the fantasy impromptu by Chopin. Even though the passage might not be completely the same, it resembles something from the etude number 4. Yeah,
For me, it felt technically very similar.
Exactly. And so those people, the reason that they have such a good prima vista is partly because of recognizing different patterns that come a lot from different pieces and different etudes. Playing a lot of different etudes will make you automatically recognize passages, recognize patterns, and you will be able to shorten your practice time in the different pieces you're playing. So far, I think you get where we are going with this video, if etudes are useful or not.
So I think that whenever you're seeing somebody that you are admiring, when you're admiring somebody's technique, for example, the fact that sometimes my students are so impressed that I can play a passage from sight reading technically, like already perfectly, or at least in their ears perfectly. And I think that students just underestimate how much of that is pattern recognition. For example, if you've played a lot of etudes with tremolos in your bass, whenever you're seeing a tremolo in, for example, a Beethoven sonata, you are going to just be able to play that pretty much instantly. So I think that just underestimating how much of that is pattern recognition and overestimating how much of that is gift and talent. So why are we talking specifically about etudes? Because in a lot of pieces, if you take, for example, the Moonlight Sonata, third movement, if you take the Appassionata Sonata, for example, the first and third movement, they're technically extremely difficult. Why are we talking about etudes? Why can't you just practice pieces? Of course you can practice pieces, but I think the great benefit of etudes is that usually, almost in all cases, one etude is specifically focused on one pattern. So if you take, for example, Chopin Etude Opus 10 number 1, it's all about arpeggios. It's the etude about big arpeggios. And I think if you conquer that etude, you're going to have not a lot of trouble with pieces that feature all different kinds of arpeggios.
And of course, when Elvira is saying this, that doesn't mean that you will not have to work anymore when you have a piece with arpeggios, but you will really shorten your time, practice time. You will just get there quicker. You will also have more pleasure because you will already be recognizing the pattern. Your hand would feel kind of natural with that pattern. So there are a lot of benefits of exploring and playing different etudes. Now I wanted to touch on another aspect of playing etudes, and that's stamina. Endurance, being able to endure playing a difficult piece, difficult passage that lasts for longer than 1 bar. Because very often in different pieces, the techniques, the type of technique changes. So you would have trios, or then you have an arpeggio, then we'll have something else. But it usually doesn't last for very long. But in some pieces you have longer lasting passages, and then you get stiff, you get tired, you start playing ugly, loud, because just you can't control your hand, can't relax anymore. And what the great benefit of etudes is that if you cover a specific pattern, the etude basically would be focused, like you said, on one specific pattern or 2 patterns, but it's very few. And so the etudes would go from, like, if you start with very simple ones, you would go from an etude of less than a page, then having 1 page, 2 pages. It can be even 4 pages, 5 pages of an etude with one specific technique. You can imagine what happens with your stamina then. You're going to train being able to endure for a very long time playing one and the same pattern. Your hand is going to adapt to that. And then once you get to play a favorite piece of yours that has a similar technique, not only you will recognize the passage, the pattern, but you will be able to last while you're playing without getting exhausted and cramping your hand, your whole arm even.
Yes, because just to add, for those of you who are actually only playing slow pieces, you might not even understand what we're talking about when we talk about stamina. But when you have to play fast for a long time, actually it can be really painful for your hand. I think Dimitar and I both remember what pain we went through actually when we were much younger, already when we were children, trying to play an etude of, for example, 4 pages of all kinds of scales in a presto tempo from beginning until the end. I mean, it was in the beginning for me not possible. I just had so much pain I had to stop.
Yeah, I have also sometimes very funny, in a nice way, experience with my students, somebody playing something. It's like, but I'm feeling tension in my arm. I'm like, you can't imagine the tension and the pain I went through when I was very, very small. So what you're experiencing is absolutely fine. It's the same way if you lift weights, if you run outside, if you do any kind of sport that you're not used to, you're going to cramp up, you're going to get tired, you're going to be in pain. It's very normal. You're just not used to.
And if you start smartly and you build up, you're going to build up that stamina relatively, wouldn't say easily, but, you know, injury-free, and you're going to build it up from having no stamina at all to having a really nice endurance.
And so the conclusion in this video, not to make it any longer because I think you get the idea, that's the things that we wanted to share with you. Elvira will just mention something else now, but I think the conclusion you can see is that even if you find etudes not the most interesting pieces to play, not the most creative, because after all, they're really not focused on being as creative as possible or as touching as possible emotionally, right? They're focused on something else. They're focused on exactly these things that we just covered: skills, patterns, endurance, being able to play one and the same passage for a long time. And so the composers, of course, are limited in that extent to what they can write in the piece. Now, I have a different opinion about some of the composers. For example, with Czerny, Elvira just mentioned, I find the creativity and the usefulness absolutely incredible. So, in our opinion, it is not a must. You definitely can play piano without etudes. At least that's my opinion. I don't know if you agree with me.
100%. Also look a little bit at your goals. I'll just add that. If you want to play only Einaudi, I don't think you have to ever touch on etudes.
Even though I would disagree, because I just had recently a student who played an Einaudi piece, and he had a passage of 16 notes lasting for quite some time.
Oh.
My student couldn't manage because he was getting tired. I mean, he's just a boy, but right, if he plays also some etudes,
Okay.
it would help.
I guess we changed opinion. Just play your etudes. So
Exactly.
let's touch on some etudes. If we've inspired you, let's touch on some etudes that you can actually do. We'll go through a few different levels and a few different suggestions. Of course, there's many other suggestions if you want to research that a little bit. So let's start with the really easy ones. So for beginners, I would suggest, I like Burgmüller very much because they have some also melodic etudes. They have like small patterns, they're very short, and they're also very, very musical, which I think is a great combination to make when you're at a beginner stage.
Also Czerny, I think it was, we'll check and we'll put it in the...
We'll put the exact number because
Yeah, I
Czerny
think it's
has...
Opus 139, which has like 100 etudes, and they start super simple, but it's absolutely incredible the different types of technique you get. Also,
we both agree that Czerny is just something really, really brilliant as far as etudes go, because he combines a lot of articulation and patterns and techniques.
The French ones?
The French ones, Lemoine and...
Duvernoy.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correct, Jean-Baptiste, and then Duvernoy or Duvernoy, I have no idea. That's how we pronounced it in Bulgaria. So, yeah, pardon my French. Yeah, because I really don't know how to pronounce the composer, but those two are really great. I played them as a kid. Czerny. Then you have you had some other suggestions for
intermediate. I like the Cramer.
I mean, Czerny can become advanced. Czerny is not just for beginners.
So Czerny is just
depending on the
forever.
opus you choose.
Yeah, you can always practice Czerny. I still practice Czerny, so yeah. We can do Cramer, which I like very much because it's also very musical as well, touching on a lot of different techniques. A little bit more advanced is Moszkowski. And like we said, we'll put the opus number of Czerny also.
And then you can go up to Chopin, Liszt, Rachmaninoff, etc. You can go to these composers as well. And so yeah, these would be our suggestions. Let us know what you think. If you're interested to send us a comment, just do it down below. We'll be happy to hear from you.
And start practicing those etudes.
Don't forget, of course, to like our video, subscribe to our channel if you want to help us, and also you can share the video with people you think might enjoy the video. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, wherever you want. For us, recording this video for you was a great pleasure, and we'll see you next time.